Alright everybody, I got another example from class today that can help you on your homework tonight and can help you review. This is multiplying decimals by decimals. So we've been talking about rational numbers, which are decimals, and today we're practicing multiplying them together. So a couple examples here. I ask my students today to use a piece of grid paper or to turn a piece of notebook paper sideways, to use the blue lines or the grid lines to keep everything organized. They make far fewer mistakes when they line their numbers up on a piece of grid paper or notebook paper turned sideways. So I would prefer them to do it that way. It really does help. So our first example, example 1 is 4.3 times 8.5. We talk about how to write this vertically instead of horizontally, so that it looks a little bit more like a traditional multiplication algorithm. So 4.3, 8.5, every number gets its own box, the decimal point goes right on the line, and we set it up as a multiplication problem. We do not have to line up decimal points when we multiply decimals. This one just happens to line up because we have the same number of digits in both numbers. So they do not have to line up. We want them lined up on the right side, just like we would if it was 43 times 85. And that's exactly the first step that we, well, maybe not the first step, but it's one of the steps that we want them to do, is to treat this like 43 and 85. So before we do that, this is what I had my students do today in class. I had them think about 4.3 and rounding it, and whether or not it's closer to 4 or 5. And in 6th grade, students are able to do that fairly well. So we are thinking that this is 4.3 is really close to 4. So we're just kind of estimating, and this is something that we're kind of doing in our head, but I'm showing it on the paper. 4.3 is really close to 4, and 8.5, if we use our rules for rounding, this is closer to 9 than it is to 8. So in our head, we're thinking that it should be close to 4 times 9, which is 36. And so we drew some thought bubbles around it today to remind them, like, this is what I'm thinking inside my head, that my answer, when I'm all done, should be close to 36. If it's not, I've made a mistake somewhere and I need to go back and check. The next thing that we talk about is, before we can treat this like 43 times 85, we need to move the decimal points over. We need to shift them over. So we're going to shift this one over, and we're going to shift this one over, so that it looks like 43 times 85, okay? But we need to either mentally or physically on the paper write that down so we don't forget what to do with the decimals when we're done. So our total shift was 1 for this first factor and another one for the second factor. So it was a decimal point shift of 2 places. So we put down 2 DP for decimal places. We talked about how it does not reference Dr. Pepper, which would be nice because I love Dr. Pepper, but it is decimal places. So when I'm done, when I find the answer, I'm going to shift my decimal back 2 places. Okay, now I can treat this like a regular multiplication problem. 5 times 3 is 15. Carry my 1. 5 times 4 is 20, plus the 1 I carried is 21. Okay? I like to cross out the digit I'm finished with and anything that I carried, so I know that I'm ready to move on. I need my placeholder 0, because if we're treating this like 85, this isn't really 8, it's really 80 because it's in the tens place once we move the decimal. So I'm going to be recording answers here, not here, so I need the placeholder 0. 8 times 3 now is 24. So I'm going to carry the 2 now. 8 times 4 is 32, plus the extra 2 here, 33, 34. So I have the partial product of 215, which came from multiplying the 5, and I have the partial product of 3,440, which came from multiplying the 8. I'm ready to combine them like I normally would when I multiply at the end here, and I'm going to get 3,655. But 3,655 is nowhere close to what I estimated, which was 36. I need to remember those two decimal places, one here and one here. I need to combine those, this one and this one, for a total of 2. And I need to, since the decimal is here now, because it looks like a whole number, I've got to move it back. So I move it between the 5 and the 5, that's 1 decimal place. Now I move it between the 6 and the 5, and that's the second decimal place. So my answer is 36 and 55 hundredths, 36.55, which is very close to what I estimated. So I can come up here now and I can write down that 4.3 times 8.5 is equal to 36 and 55 hundredths, okay? And if I need to record it on my answer sheet or whatever, I can record it right there. Having the students box their answers so it's easier to find. And hopefully this graph paper really helps them label everything, organize everything, have their thoughts on the page so that they know where to go if they've made a mistake. They can easily find it without having to look real hard. That's the basic process for multiplying a decimal times a decimal. I'm going to do one more video that talks about a couple of variations of this when we've got some different looking numbers. Hope this helps, especially on your homework tonight. Thanks a lot.